So now let's look at extending things and writing a full program now using functions. A single function is helpful, but we want to make an entire program around it. And I want to use the same function we just did. So we're going to be using, that's why I didn't create a new file for the cube. I want to reuse this file here. And I want to change it so I don't have to keep entering all these numbers. We already have it in there, but I could, kilometer to miles, 100, kilometer to miles, 12,000. In case you really, what is the Earth? 25,000 miles in diameter, or not diameter, circumference or something. Actually, that was wrong. That was kilometer. I had to flip it around to the other direction. But my point is, I have to keep typing this in over and over and over. I kind of don't want to do that. And that's not a really helpful program if I have to keep typing that thing in every single time. I'd rather just run a program and then have it do it for me. So instead of doing that, let's convert this to actually use input. We know how to do input, right? So we're just going to prompt the user for some input, and then we'll do the conversion, and then we'll display some output, and maybe we'll do a little bit fancier than we did previous version of it. So below the function, and make sure you're not at the same indentation level, and you want to be up against the left-hand side in this particular case, because that's part of the main part of the program. We want to get input from a user. And I mentioned this when someone asked earlier, but if you provide an argument, it's going to print the argument in front of the place it's expecting the user to type something in. So by passing that string, we're going to display a prompt. And it's always a good idea to display a prompt, because otherwise the user is just waiting for input on a blank thing and they don't know what they're doing. In fact, it looks like everything just hung. And so the prompt says, hey, do something for me, and here's what you need to do. Now we need to store that value somewhere. So let's put in a variable. I'm going to call it d kilometer for distance kilometers. Remember though, that's a string, not a number. So now we need to convert it, and we can convert it directly here just by putting float around it. And float makes the most sense because you can have 10.5, 11.12, 1.5. So because we can enter floats, we should make sure that this converts from a float. If we had an integer conversion and then the user put 1.5, it would break. And so we're going to basically ask for input, get a string back, convert that string to a float, and then assign that float to the d_kilometer variable. And then we're just going to do our conversion. Kilometer to miles, and we're going to pass in the argument. So I use those words and it can be a little confusing. It's a parameter. It's a parameter inside of the function definition, but when you're calling it, and this is a method call, and then I'm just going to hard code a number here for this example. This is an argument. The argument gets copied into the parameter, and it happens in order. So if I have multiple parameters, it copies them in the same order. So I have that there as my argument. It's going to convert that value, whatever was entered by the user, put it in this variable, and at which point we can just print that out. If we save that, we can run it. We can say, so we have our method, our function. It's going to do our conversion, return the distance. So it's also a good idea to have that first. We're going to get the number from the user, turn it into a float, pass that as an argument to our function, take that value, print it out. So now it's just in kilometers, and I put 10, and I think I did that earlier. Yep, same thing. So give us the prompt. I entered the number, ran it, and printed it. Now, this doesn't look very good. So remember, when you're formatting your prompts, think about doing something like a colon and a space. That just makes it look better. It doesn't change how it works, but it makes it look better. Now the number looks a lot better for me. So a prompt is just a way of communicating to the user. And as we've, I don't know if any of you have seen pictures of web pages in the 1990s versus the web pages you see today, but boy, were they ugly. Same thing, right? Your prompt should be, clean. It's called user interface, right? The user interface experience. It really makes a difference to the users, but it's just something also to practice in your code. Now, it also makes sense for us to print out a label. The label is just some text that kind of describes what this value is. And I'm just going to print it here, but I want to print two things out. First one's a string, second one's a float. Can I concatenate these? Is this going to work? If I run that, is it going to work? Anybody have a thought on that? Maybe? Oh, I have a no. Another no with a question. Let's actually try it. All right, 10 kilometers. Oh. Can only concatenate string to string, not a float. So we have that other type error. So we cannot actually convert that. We cannot, or rephrase that. We cannot actually concatenate that float to the string. It doesn't work. So we have to make this a string. And how do we do that? We use str. So we use str. str is going to take that distance in miles, which is a float, convert it to a string, and then we concatenate string to string. And so now, passing something like 10, oh, looks like I need some better formatting. I didn't put a space in there. Oh, sorry, something weird happened there. Things moved around a little too much. 10, and there's my answer. And now I can just keep running the program over and over with different values. Let's do the marathon. 42 kilometers, this meaning 26.1. So we can do these different things. We can even do a float. We can pass in a floating point number because we said we could, 42.1. Something, it's like 42.125 or something is a real marathon. So it's a float. But we can run it multiple times now, and I don't have to edit my code, right? That was the whole point of user input. But I'm also doing a conversion. String to float, float to string. And I'm using a function so I can do multiple calculations over and over again. And now I have this formula that's just been written as a function that allows me to do that.